Hello, and welcome to Desinda Dev. Yes, that's right. We are rebranded. We now have a new name called Desinda Dev. It was originally Story Dev, as mentioned. And there's a reason for this. There's a couple of things that you've probably noticed. Well, first of all, there's a new background. There is indeed a new background. This is not a green screen. Trust me, it isn't. A green screen is actually right here. As you can see, not using it right now. Well, so a couple of things have changed. I've moved home. Um, I was actually kind of forced to. Landlady decided to send a text saying, "You're leaving," basically. Um, so had to leave, but found a place. It's actually quite decent, actually, surprisingly, and actually chose a room with a decent computer desk, and it's actually surprisingly quiet as well. Now that I'm not in a shared flat, I can speak as loud as I necessarily can for the purposes of recording, so I don't have to try and be quiet for the purposes of not interrupting other people in other rooms, because there are no other rooms, if you get what I mean. So, no more of that, which is great. And finally, as I am in a new room, there's nobody here. I'm on my own. This is great. So, what does this mean? Well, there's a couple of things. So, I mentioned Desinda Dev, that's the new name. So, there's a reason for that. So, obviously, since moving, you kind of change your lifestyle a little bit. You kind of change the way you think about things. And obviously, when you make changes like this in your life, it kind of makes a lot of changes. And I had to settle down, right? Before I could really sit down and start properly recording videos again, I had to just kind of like get a feel for the environment, actually try and, you know, set settle down basically in my new living arrangements and get a feel for the place and start to work out what I want to achieve in my life. Get what I mean? I'm sure. um, but then, so with regards to the rename to Desinda Dev, so this is basically a rebrand, right? So what has gone on in the meantime? So obviously the last video was to do with user interface building, right? Still want to do that. That's still on the radar. Still want to build it. I was looking at the possibility of potentially making a new programming language. Now, there's a reason I started it, and then I was kind of like, maybe I don't want to do this. Maybe it's going a bit too far. Um, and you get the idea, right? I'm doing what I basically said in my very first UI dev video, where I was talking about, oh, let's procrastinate and go into another project and see how that works out, and it's not going to work. Twinspire, which is a thing, is no longer going to be developed. I've made that decision because of this rebrand, Desinda Dev. The Twinspire is no longer going to exist. I've made this decision because Twinspire was written in 3 different languages that is impossible to maintain. So I'm basically starting from scratch now. What does this mean for the future of developing on Twinspire? Well, you can use Twinspire if you want. It's basically built on top of Raylib. I'm going to be developing software in order to build something useful like a user interface or tools, software development, perhaps probably game development, which is what I'm most interested in. But overall, my goals is to build software tools. So, although games is where I want to be, I don't think that's really where I want to be developing. I don't want to be developing the games themselves. I think my interest is in the tools that helps to develop those games. So this is something that I've meditated on over the past week and a half, is what I like to do and what I want to achieve. And Desinda Dev, again, so the name behind Desinda, but I actually have a gaming channel called Desinda Gaming, which didn't really take off. I made a couple of videos and then just kind of left it alone for a long time. So the name Desinda comes from that. And then Desinda Dev, meaning obviously development, right? Already got a domain name for the thing, Desinda.dev. Basically, it's not up and running yet. I'm not much of a web developer. I'm not going to pretend to be a web developer. I'm not going to even try web development because I hate it. I really don't like it. Seriously, I don't. My passion is in low-level programming, and that's why I enjoy using Odin. So yeah, I mean, I'm not touching the web. It frustrates me too much. So I'm basically just going to build some website using some tool somewhere, somewhen. Not sure when yet, but it will happen, I'm sure. So that's that. So with regards to what I'm doing then, let me open up Visual Studio Code and tell you what I'm doing, or show you what I'm doing. So there's a thing called NC Star that I was going to be the name for this new language that I was thinking of, but well, that's not going to happen. So instead, what I've decided is I'm going to make NC Star the actual library that Desinda Dev makes, right? The Desinda Dev, you could say, as a company, or rather me at the moment, I'm working on this thing called NC Star. It's a library that's going to be written in Odin, only in Odin. No such thing as C# or anything like this. I've done a bit of project development, as you can see here, and done quite a bit of work already. I'm not going to turn this into a programming video. That's not what I'm going to be doing here. I am making an announcement this video, basically, and I will continue to work on this project in my free time outside of video content. What the videos I'm going to be doing is going to be based on the progress that I make and demonstrating the progress. So actually being able to illustrate some actual physical work and actually showing you how the things are being achieved, right? So, what is NC Star? So NC Star is based on the original idea that we had when I first started this video series, UI Dev, which is to do with the fact that I'm not particularly happy with the difference in retained mode and immediate mode, and you know the differences between the two could be together to form something that could potentially be a lot more suitable for UI, for user interface development, which barely no one does, right? You've got a lot of retained mode interfaces tend to have this mishmash of trying to interface in an immediate context via something like an event. So in WinForms, for example, or Windows Forms applications, in .NET, for example, you have what's called a paint event. And basically that's basically changing what would normally be the rendering that happens in the background in every single component being done manually by you, the user who's developing the component, and basically going back down into the immediate mode context via the graphics class, which is basically the same thing. So basically, a lot of these retained mode user interfaces start off immediate mode, technically, in the grand scheme of things. But what they tend to do is, instead of so this is what baffles me about retained mode user interface, is the way it works is you start off with immediate mode, which is almost always going to be the case, because there's no other way to render graphics, right? The only way to render graphics is you generate a buffer of vertices normally and send it to the graphics card, and then the graphics card decides what to draw on the screen based on those vertices, right? It's very simple. But what tends to happen with retained mode programming in the user interface world is you have this thing that is designed to wrap around the immediate mode interfaces to basically make it easier to, so say, build a user interface. But instead of continuing to expose the immediate mode context to make it available to the developer, instead they hide it. And if you want to interface with it, you have to do it through some contrived method, right? And that makes programming user interfaces in a lot of retained mode contexts, and the web is especially guilty of this, is when you want to do custom graphics drawing, you have to go through this method that just, for some reason, the developers who designed the infrastructure for the retained mode API wanted to make it incredibly difficult for you to do it. And I don't know why. It just doesn't really make much sense. It's like they're trying so hard to make it so difficult for you to be able to draw in immediate mode context when it might actually be necessary. And I want to change that. I want to change that because this is why I'm not very happy with the way in which user interface APIs work in this day and age. So I'm starting from scratch. The project that I was working on, which was Twinspire in the original series, was to do with building a user interface library based on Twinspire. Well, Twinspire doesn't exist anymore, so we're kind of starting from scratch. I will probably be copying and pasting quite a lot of stuff from it, but I'm also kind of writing things from scratch anyway. So what am I doing here? Let me tell you what is going on here. So think of this video as kind of like a sneak peek into the API, or what could become of the API. Obviously, this is subject to change, so bear that in mind. Basically, the lowest level that you will see is composition. The structure, which currently just takes shapes, which is a dynamic array of shape, and a shape basically says, well, we're going to draw something, and it's going to be of specific width, height, X and Y position, and if there is an alignment, let's take a look at alignment. Okay, so what is align object? Well, align object, so that's a structure as well. There's v-align, h-align, scope. Align scope is inside and outside. It's probably not the best name for that, but it was the only thing I could think of at the time. So basically what that's basically saying is, are we aligning on the inside or outside of the subject object? In this case, what we're aligning to. If we're not aligning to anything, then we're aligning to the inside of the subject container, that being the composition itself. So the composition will actually have an XY width height. So what does this all mean in practice? Well, you're probably noticing there's this thing called distance inside shape. You're probably wondering, what the hell is distance? Distance consists of two values: measure type, which is unit measure, either in pixels or percent, and value. Okay, so value, if the measure type is a percent, then the value is a value between 0 and 1. And if it's pixels, then it can be literally any value you wanted. Now, why distance and not something like just a flat float value? Well, there's a reason for that. So the composition is not designed to be the thing that is drawn in terms of the physical width and height of that particular object. If we were to have an object that we want to draw, then we would probably have an actual object like this, for example, the button. Just as an example, right? And inside button, we would have something like composition, and that consists of multiple shapes taking on several states. So the composition will eventually, apologies. So the composition would consist of shapes, what to draw, and where to draw it within the context of the subject interface, component, whatever you want to call it. This is just an example, obviously. This might not necessarily be what I do in the end, but that's the idea. So it's a very low level way of defining what any kind of widget could be and how it's drawn. Okay. And the reason I want to do this is to make it as easy as possible to build your own custom widgets without going too far with it. Sometimes it goes a bit too far. So another thing I want to be able to achieve with this is the ability to perform things like interaction. Now, how would we do that in practice? Well, that's something I'm obviously going to have to think about. If we go to draw composition, so what's happening is, so I've obviously got some flat colors here that I'm just using for testing purposes. I haven't actually built a test yet to actually test any of this. But basically, inside each composition, so we're taking a composition by reference, we're going to get the shapes. Actually, it's not a reference, it's technically a value in those in, but whatever. I'm used to references. Sorry. Anyway, it's so we're getting a pointer to a value that consists of the shapes that's inside of composition, and we're going to iterate through each one, and we're going to get the values of each of the x, the y, the width, and the height, and we're going to use that to determine what we're drawing. So as you can see here, I'm switching on the draw, and we're going to go through each one of these to determine what it is we're drawing and where. Image and text I'm going to work out later once I understand how I want to do it. Probably the data doesn't sit in a composition, it will probably sit somewhere else. And then triangles, which is work in progress, as you can probably tell. I've got this procedure here that's meant to return a fixed array of vector 2s that would represent the points for the triangles depending on the direction, but obviously that isn't complete yet, and that's about it at the moment. Like I say, this is a work in progress. This is something that's, so my time hasn't really changed. My time, what was I gonna say? Time on this project hasn't really changed much. I'm still working where I was working before. So still in the full-time job, so I can't really work on this full time. And then obviously social life, etc. Whatever. You don't really care about that. Basically, nothing has really changed much besides the fact that we're starting from scratch. And I think it's for a good reason. I hope this is the right decision. Change the name to Desinda and do away with story dev. I think the name story dev was kind of, it gave the impression that nothing was being done. But I want to start making the impression now that things are going to start getting done and actually get things done properly. So, my thinking at the moment, the way I want to do this, so obviously this is kind of a spur of a moment video that I'm literally making right now. But the way I want to do this, I'll probably make a video at least once every fortnight. If I can do it once a week, great. But if I can't, then it'll be once every fortnight. The reason I say that is because there will be times when I can't work on this. Or there will be times when I just don't have the ability to work on it due to this, that, or the other. There's too much going on in my life, and other things are bringing me away from programming. It's naturally going to happen, right? Life happens, and we have to go with the flow. That's just the way it is. So that's my thoughts at the moment, and hopefully you're okay with that. So yeah, nothing much has changed. I'm hoping to continue working on what I enjoy doing. User interfaces is going to be the first thing that I'm going to be working on. NC Star is going to be the name of the library. Basically, there's nothing in. I haven't even started testing anything yet. But this is the general idea behind this project thus far. So that is going to be it from me. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you, I believe this is a step in the right direction, because I think the original projects, it wasn't going in the right direction. I think this is going in the right direction. So stay tuned for more videos once a week if I can, otherwise every fortnight. And when I do a video, I will be showing results rather than just programming and it not really showing much. Okay? Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.